So, let me give you the backstory on this herb garden. I originally created this herb garden about 6 years ago, and we used branches that my husband cut from a tree that had fallen in our backyard. So, I used those branches to make a raised bed to establish a little herb garden for us. But of course, because those branches were not treated with anything, after 6 years, they were in pretty bad shape. They had started to rot and they were decomposing. So I started looking for a more permanent solution. I wanted to keep my little herb garden and I wanted to keep the footprint the same, but I wanted to use a material that was going to last forever. And then I remembered that I had these Belgian blocks on the side of the house. My husband is a civil engineer, and one of his projects about 20 years ago involved demolishing an old building and the associated surroundings of that building. And there was a lot of Belgian block that was going to be removed from the site. So the contractor told my husband, you can take as much of the Belgian block as you want. So over a period of several weeks, my husband would bring home in his car 3 or 4 of these Belgian blocks. They are solid granite and they're extremely heavy. I was using them as a retaining wall of sorts on my side garden where I had tried to establish a little vegetable garden. That was several years ago, and I eventually gave up the vegetable garden because that side of the house did not get enough sun. So I decided to repurpose them for this herb garden redo. Originally I wasn't going to make a video about this. My husband had already removed the rotting logs when I picked up my camera, but then I thought this may inspire you to carve out a little space in your garden for a little herb garden of your own. So right now you're seeing me put down the first row of the Belgian blocks. I am keeping the herb garden the same size as it was before. I do have a layer of landscape fabric, actually 2 layers of landscape fabric, because this is going to be a dry stacked wall, meaning I'm not going to have mortar between these Belgian blocks, and because they're so irregular in shape and size and no two are alike, so I didn't want the soil to wash out from between the joints. So that is why I put a layer of 2 layers of the landscape fabric first, and I'm going to be building the wall around that. I knew going into this project that this was not going to be one of those projects where everything is leveled and everything lines up, because there was so much variance in each of these Belgian blocks that I tried my best to find ones that were approximately the same size and that were fairly flat, but I still had to sometimes prop some up with pieces of stone underneath just to make it look a little bit more even. I was going for a rustic cottage look, so I really didn't mind that this wasn't going to be perfectly straight, perfectly even. I had enough Belgian blocks to do 3 rows, and I felt that that was deep enough for herbs. Herbs don't normally have very deep roots, and I was going to be backfilling with more soil to bring up the soil level. So I felt that the 3 rows of Belgian blocks were going to be enough. After backfilling with soil and adding a planter to the middle of the herb garden, I decided that I would create sections, 4 different sections, just to keep the herb garden tidy because herbs tend to take over wherever you plant them. So I wanted to bring some organization, and I had some salvaged bricks that my husband brought home from another project, and I decided that those would be a good option for that purpose. During this process, I would periodically go up to my deck and look down just to double check that my lines were as straight as they could be and that my quadrants were roughly the same size. So now it was time to plant. I had herbs spread out all over my garden, so I decided to transplant all of them to this revamped herb garden. So I started with the basil that I had in little pots by my front garden. And I also transplanted my chives to one of the sections. To save money, rather than going out and buying herbs from like Home Depot or Lowe's, I decided to use seed packets instead. And I decided to plant the herbs that I use the most. So I had parsley, I had another pack of basil because we do go through a lot of basil. And even though this is not technically an herb, I do love radishes. We use them for salads, for soups. The leaves make an excellent soup. So I planted some radishes. And then something that I've never planted before is chamomile. I don't really have any experience growing chamomile, but I thought, let me just plant a few seeds and see what happens. This footage was taken several weeks after I sowed my seeds. As you can see, they're doing quite well. Well, some of them are doing quite well. So this is the parsley. I planted it next to the chives because I didn't have enough space for its own section. This is the radish section. Now I planted this whole section with radish. Only half of them are coming up. I don't know what's going on with the other half. Maybe the seeds were too old. The basil is also doing really well. I have lots of little basil seedlings coming up and I'm really excited thinking of all the pesto I'm going to make with those. But my chamomile section was a complete disappointment. There's nothing happening here except a few weeds. That's all I have. So I don't know, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Maybe they just take a little bit longer to germinate. But this is the status of the herb garden several weeks later. And this is what the herb garden looks like 3 weeks later. Much more lush. Most of the herbs are filling in very nicely. The parsley is looking very healthy, so is the basil. I actually have to start harvesting it so that they get nice and bushy. The radishes are coming in nicely. Actually, I think it's time, or past the time that I harvest them. I find that if you leave them in the ground too long, they turn too peppery, so I need to get those out of the ground. The big disappointment was the chamomile. A few of them came up, but they're not looking too healthy. I don't know if they're ever going to flower. I'm not sure what I did wrong. Maybe they just need more space or more soil. So if you have experience growing chamomile, would you please let me know how I can do this better? I am planning on trying again, so I would appreciate any help that you can give me in the comment section. Now, I do have other planters around the herb garden. I have oregano. This is lemon balm, which is very good for tea. I dry it and make tea with it. I have some mint in this one. And then I also have some French tarragon, which I absolutely love. And I have a pot with thyme. And then on the slope, I'm growing some more mint, and I'm hoping that will eventually cover that whole slope. This is actually peppermint. So all that is left to do now is just to add some finishing touches to make the space more comfortable. I have some thrifted furniture. This is actually the table and the metal chair were in a dumpster. They were full of rust. My husband brought them home and I cleaned them up and I spray painted them in this red color. And the other two chairs have this beautiful paisley tile design, and I thrifted those from Goodwill for $10 each. For the other side of the herb garden, I brought in this wicker seat that I thrifted. The area behind me is a bit of a mess right now. That really does need an overhaul, and that's on my to-do list for next spring. Right now, I'm just going to forget about it. I'm going to face the bench towards the herb garden so that I can enjoy the view. I do love to sit here and drink a cup of tea or read, and it really is the perfect place to relax. Thank you for stopping by today. I hope you'll consider subscribing so you can be notified of future videos that I post.